CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. All right, folks, if you don't know him, you're about to. The man you see on screen, or if you're just listening, it is Dan. I call him the man, Anderson. He is with TRM, that's Total Resource Management. He is the Senior Director of Consulting, and he is the chairman of the board at SMRP. That's the Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals. Dan and I hooked up earlier this week. We're talking about, hey, what have you been up to lately? And he shared some news with me about an event he's heading to next week that is important for all of this because he's heading out of North America and going to, where are you going, Dan?
I'm going over to London, England, sir.
Now, first of all, be careful over there because you have to watch what you say. But right now, you're on CMMS Radio, so all is fair.
I'm free to talk freely with you, Greg, like we're friends, like we always do.
Damn right. And this, so this conference you're going to is IAM. What does that stand for?
It's the Institute of Asset Management, and it's a global conference over there. I've been fortunate enough that IAM and SMRP have formed a partnership, because we have very good reciprocating benefits between both organizations. IAM has their body of knowledge when it comes to asset management, which is more broader, development of, if you think of ISO 55000 and development of policies and strategic asset management plans, which are more higher level, whereas the SMRP body of knowledge is much more blue collar, right? Tailored to the maintenance and reliability folks out there. But what I've seen is some of the more successful projects that come through in maintenance and reliability have executive sponsorship. And usually building a policy and a strategic asset management plan are essential ingredients to that. So hence the partnership between IAM and SMRP. So excited to talk to you a little bit about it today.
Well, so you mentioned ISO 55000, and there's other numbers behind it, but that in and of itself is something that a lot of people, they know what it is, and they may or may not be meeting those, I'm going to call them parameters, but there's plenty of them that don't necessarily know what it actually is. And I know there's one person that we happen to know in common that is heavily into that, but also is constantly trying to connect those dots to why that matters to the frontline, mid-level, and upper management, and then the greater, I don't know, maybe the world. And I'm talking about Mark LaPlante, but how do you see, now that you're kind of focused in on how those things complement one another, what that could really mean for people when they're looking at both?
So, when you're looking at, the framework, and ISO 55000 has been widely adopted over in Europe, Canada widely adopts it. Not so much here in the U.S. It's been on the cusp of conversations within the maintenance and reliability community for, almost 10 years now. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the reasons it's not widely adopted, and I'm talking about the ISO 55000 standard, is because, the insurance regulators really haven't made it important for organizations to have a policy and a SAMP. When I say a policy is usually a 1-2 page document written by your executive leadership that shows the importance of having an asset management strategy for your organization. That's just an overarching strategy saying this is the way we're going to manage our assets within the organization. The SAMP, or the Strategic Asset Management Plan, is usually something a little bit more granular, which gets into, middle management, putting together rules that say, okay, we hear the policy from our executive leadership. The SAMP we're going to implement to really ensure that we're managing our assets. Then you get into something, because what that does is that leaves folks at the plant level being like, well, what's the next step? What's the next step? All this strategy stuff is great, but how does that apply here? And how do I go about? And I'd say the next phase, Greg, of that is something that we're familiar with, which is building equipment maintenance plans. Putting together we're identifying the assets that we have out there in production, and we're saying, okay, we're going to go through and we're going to manage the maintenance on these assets by doing these activities to regulate. And so you go from like almost a policy to a SAMP to the equipment maintenance planning. When you look at the equipment maintenance planning, that's when you get into the body of knowledge at SMRP and why that's critical. When you're talking above that, you're talking, very high level strategic stuff, which is very well thought out and what IAM specializes in. SMRP specializes in the body of knowledge and the KPIs for, folks out in the maintenance and reliability community.
Yeah, and the whole time you're describing this, I'm looking for these kind of opportunities to connect the dots myself, because at face value, we know there's value there in how those two worlds come together, overlap, and make an impact for organizations. But I'm always saying, hey, is the front line, our doers, are they coming along for that ride? Are they really included in it? Because I would imagine, and I'm not saying I know this, but I would imagine that frontline all the way up to kind of mid-level management, everybody effective in their roles. Let's say they've got, a good moving program, right? They've got good culture and all this. There's a lot of those things that those folks know about, but they're like, look, I can't get into the weeds on that stuff. I know it's there. I'm going to leave that to that level of the organization. And I'm almost relying on them making sure it doesn't bug me, distract me, confuse me, or get in the way of what I'm here to do, right? Like those things can be disruptive because it's like, all right, we're moving really good. We're doing all of our stuff. We've got solid uptime. OEE is good-ish. I'm using that as a placeholder, whatever metrics you use. But you bring in those things and it can be disruptive. So I'm curious about what you know at this point, right? Because you're certainly going to be further and further immersed in it, how that really works. Because I think there's this weird thing that happens in every organization where there's we do this, and then there's down here. I don't mean above or below, but just as a structure of an organization. Here, we do what we do. How do we make those things really work together so it's not kind of getting in the way of what both need to do?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Greg. And, I think about it a lot of times. And, for any process improvement initiative, whether it be lean, Six Sigma, reliability, whatever, for any ones to be truly successful, you need executive level sponsorship. And the reason that you need that is because you need the funding to fuel those efforts within an organization. Now, if you think about it, and just think about business in general, right? Most CEOs and higher level C-level contacts, they come from a sales and marketing background. And I think that, if you were to do a quick Google search, you'd probably see that most organizations are run by sales and marketing folks. Well, they have a hard time understanding what the plant level folks and the engineers and the folks that we deal with on a daily basis have to go through every day. And so in order to obtain money from them, you really need a compelling business case,
Right.
Something that's going to come back and say, oh, if I increase efficiencies on this production line, or if I implement planning and scheduling at my site, or if I bring on this new technology that's going to reap all these rewards that, many times get promised by folks out there. They need a compelling reason to make that change and make that investment. And the framework that's associated with ISO 55000 and asset management allows you to do that. It allows your executive level leaders that may come from a sales and marketing background. You may be lucky enough to have one that comes from manufacturing and has risen through the ranks and gotten to be at that point, or engineering for that fact of the matter, right? But I think a lot of times we struggle in that communication between the plant, the site level, the ones that are getting it done every day, to the folks that are in that C-suite. And so the combination of the two, of IAM, SMRP, is just a powerful thing. And so, I've spent 5 years speaking at the North American conference. The past 2 years, I've spoken at the global conference. And the reason I'm there is to discuss the reciprocated benefits of our partnership with IAM. So IAM members, get the same membership benefits as SMRP members. SMRP members get the same benefits as IAM members. So, the partnership that we have with IAM allows us to open that up and really kind of help both communities evolve into, a more holistic understanding of the business of reliability.
So okay, the business of reliability only succeeds with the work of reliability, which is in fact maintenance, which has nothing to do with repairs. It's about it's quite the opposite, right? You're trying to avoid repairs and be extremely selective about when you, let's say, intercede to mitigate and do these things that will, I don't know if I want to say prevent or eliminate, because I think that's a bit of a misnomer and real popular. It's a popular way to describe things. What you're doing is just improving the likelihood that you have more uptime with said machine, said line, whatever the business is. But when you combine those two, there could be, over a period of time, let's say this is flourishing over the next 1 to 2 years, and that kind of sends a little bit of a ripple effect where now you've got these two kind of seemingly different parts of an organization kind of lockstepping a little bit, or at least saying, hey, we know why we're doing that. We might not like it, but we like our outcomes. So that's that. This is this. And it sounds so simple, but it really is. Everybody's out here making all this stuff complicated. Maintenance people, in my experience, and I'm not saying I have all of it, right? They're not interested in nonsense. They want to know why, because that's already what they do. If they were all by themselves and they were maintaining a piece of equipment or a facility or anything in between, those are the things they're all about. Where's the problem? What caused it? How can I get that to improve?
Yeah.
And if they spend more time seeing and not having to be involved in how overall company operation works, then they can focus on their role, but they have a little bit more allowance, tolerance, acceptance, and understanding of why that is. However, I'm going to flip that around and say the other way around, that seems to be where the challenge is. So now I'm changing the conversation a little bit to this idea of the C-suite, top-level management, leadership, doing what they do. And I feel like oftentimes they need to do better about understanding what's happening at the foundational levels of their organization, because nothing's going to get produced if the machines that produce the stuff are not maintained. But there's way too much lack of understanding, refusal of understanding. This might be controversial, but do you think that's a problem? And do you think what you're about to do there and what's happening with this relationship does in fact help?
It does. It does. I think, one of the things too, and I found so many times in all these projects that I've worked on, Greg, that in order for any reliability initiative to be successful, to have, good CMMS, a good predictive maintenance program, a good MRO, good planning and scheduling, all those things that mean something to folks at the plant level, there needs to be two foundational elements. And I'll give you the secret of success, the secret sauce. And that's plant partnerships. And that means that reliability is not a maintenance initiative. It's a partnership between maintenance and operations. And then executive sponsorship. It has to be driven from the top down. You can't just be a disengaged executive contact, vice president within an organization, and say, I want reliability to happen, and then step away and let whoever goes. You have to be there and be visible. You have to change that culture within the organizations. So, again, the two essential ingredients: plant partnerships, a partnership between maintenance and operations, that, operations gives up the machines to go out there and do proactive maintenance on the machines, and then executive sponsorship. Without those two foundational elements, 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, your initiative is going to fail. So I think that those are two real important ingredients. And what you allow folks to do by building a good asset management structure within the organization is you do, like you had mentioned earlier, you help the folks, the vice presidents, the C-suite folks understand there is value to be obtained by, reduction in downtime, by keeping your machines, by having operations engaged, to do some of these smaller maintenance checks and adjustments. And when they hear a belt squealing or a bearing that, is maybe packed with grease and stuck, that they can call over and have that replaced or do some minor modifications. One thing that I learned a lot from George Williams was, hey, you walk into an organization and, you see, hey, that there's all these work orders that have been issued, but no parts have been replaced. Well, at the end of the day, that is a true sign of an organization that's using maintenance as a service organization. So anytime they hear something, it's like, maintenance, come out and adjust this, adjust that, adjust this. Well, then they adjust things and throw what the machine was designed for way out of whack. So, it really is a good amalgamation of a lot of different things, but I think it really starts with the foundational elements in that you have maintenance and operations working together, but then you have executive leadership understand the value of that and the value of reliability.
So much that you just said, reliability. And I also have that benefit of learning from, industry peers and real deal pros and experts like George Williams, Joe Anderson. I can name them all, right? You've probably seen or heard about, who knows, the syndicate, those are the monsters that really get it. But everything you described, this idea that reliability, who owns it, it's certainly organizational, right? So everybody owns reliability. They should participate in reliability. And when you talk about those VP levels and above, and look, I'm not crucifying anyone here. I'm saying the more they actually know, not just read it but spent time in it and start to understand how to connect what's happening at that foundational level on the front line to the organization, that starts to create that, I don't know if I like the word synergy, but, people getting together and working as a team, because far too often we see in every single organization somewhere, this little thing is hiding in a corner somewhere, and it's the infighting. You referenced it about, like operations and maintenance. It's like, hey, we need to maintain that line or that machine. And while we're doing that, we're going to do these other two because that's going to increase throughput, simply stated. And they're like, yeah, but we got to hit our metrics, because if today we don't hit X, we're in trouble. And maintenance is going, yeah, but tomorrow you're going to hit double X, right? I came up with this analogy while you're describing it. Imagine if you were a race car driver, right? And your car needs to be worked on and fixed. And you're doing good, but they see an anomaly or something that's about to happen with the vehicle, and they say, hey, you got to pit. And then you're the driver, right? I don't know if this is a great analogy, but you're the driver and you're like, no, I'm getting one more lap in, and you blow the engine.
Yeah.
And it's because they don't know necessarily what's at stake. And that's what we all need to know and understand. You don't have to like it. You just have to know what it is. There's plenty of stuff everybody does that they don't like, but they're like, yep, that has to be done. You can't skip safety things, right? You can't skip, you're not supposed to ever be unaccountable. Right. So all these things come together. So this is cool that you're going over and doing that. And I want to wrap up with a little bit about your role at TRM, because we haven't had a ton of time to catch up and talk about that. But what's happening there that you're excited about right now for the organization, having been there now? I don't know how long it is now. It's getting 6 months, maybe more.
Yeah. No, thank you for asking that, Greg. Very exciting opportunity at TRM, Total Resource Management. A lot of folks might be familiar that, with the past couple of years have acquired IDCON, which has been in the maintenance and reliability community for a long time, and PCA, Performance Consulting Associates. So my role with TRM is to help folks to understand that, hey, we're here to address the people, process, and technology side of things. I think better than a lot of folks out there that, the CMMS at the end of the day is a tool. And you can do a lot of things with a CMMS, but if you don't build those foundational processes into it, have good planning and scheduling, have good materials management, have all of the good best practices woven in before you implement it, you're not going to yield the results you desire out of it. Ron Moore once told me one time, he said, buying a shiny new CMMS is like buying Microsoft Word and expecting it to have a novel written for you. If you don't put in the work, it's not going to be successful. And so that's our goal at TRM, by, having the consulting practice that, between IDCON and PCA, you've got over 100 years experience and tremendous tools. I mean, you've spoken with tons of folks from IDCON and PCA throughout the years. So, you understand that there's a lot of knowledge base that comes there. And so my role is to really help organizations understand that, hey, because a lot of folks know TRM as the largest Maximo implementer in the country.
Right.
But we've got capabilities in Hexagon, SAP, a ton of other companies that have been acquired under the TRM umbrella, along with IDCON and PCA to support organizations.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Stratum Consulting, and as it relates to Octave, but in all of these scenarios, it doesn't have to be exclusive to what your forte is or has been, and it's not just the acquisitions TRM has made, which are good acquisitions and creates a wider kind of breadth and depth of ability to help people. So you've got the Maximo, but you've already cited a few others. And even if that's not the case, people could still reach out for the help, the guidance, and the assistance. I want to shout out two things about one person. You talked about doing the work. That always reminds me of Brian Bieski. And everything he says mostly can be boiled down to, sure, you need some context, but do the work. You're not doing the work. That's why it's not working. You're not doing the work. And that might be because somebody doesn't understand their role in it, why it matters. And that's why you need to fix that instead of just telling people what to do.
Yeah.
Allow them to know what they want to do and be accountable. The other thing that Brian Bieski talked to me about somewhat recently was this concept of a chief maintenance officer within organizations, whether they provide the technologies and the solutioning and whatnot, or if they're the company itself that's trying to move better from a maintenance and reliability perspective, an asset management perspective, and connect all the dots. If you have a real chief maintenance officer, which would be someone that's got the right kind of experience, that has really actually done it, not just reading books, those things, you have that potential to always connect the front line to the board. And that's important too. Brother, I appreciate you making time on short notice, and I'm going to get this bad boy out quick because you're about to jump on a plane and go over to London. I hope you have fun. Grab a little bit of proper English breakfast on my behalf, please, since I won't
I
be
don't
there.
know if those blood rashers kind of scare me a little bit for breakfast. The English breakfast. I will, try to embellish. Of course, I'm going to get some fish and chips, maybe a cask lager or something while I'm over there. But thank you so much, Greg. It's always a pleasure joining you and catching up with you.
Yeah, there he is, folks. It's Dan the Man Anderson, SMRP, but also TRM, Total Resource Management. Thank you, brother, for being here with me on CMMS Radio.
Thank you, Greg.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.